we will pivot to the Southern Cone, and I will invite our next panel to join me here on the virtual stage. I'd like to invite up to the virtual stage Juan Martin Bulgaroni from Pan American Energy, Decio Odone from Analta, Sylvie Dapot from IBP, Christian Ituri from Shell. If you all want to join me here on the virtual stage, please. I believe we got a message. Unfortunately, we received a last-minute message from Rafaela Guedes that the Petrobras CEO has called a meeting right now, and so she will not be able to join us. But we will plow forward, and I guess it goes without saying that a general in charge at Petrobras, you don't show up late for the meeting. So Juan Martin, can you turn your camera on, and we'll.
My camera is on. Can you hear me?
We'll see if we can get Juan Martin's camera on. Welcome to the virtual stage. Look at this. This is also La Jolla Conference veteran panel here, and Institute of the Americas former board member, current and former board members, and good old friends panel. We're going to talk about natural gas and the Southern Cone with a strong focus on Brazil and a focus on Argentina. We'll talk about some of the other countries, Bolivia and others as well at the end in terms of regional integration, but we'll really dive more into Brazil and Argentina. Just to reset and welcome everyone again, Juan Martin Bulgaroni, who is the Vice President for Upstream Strategy and Planning for Argentina at Pan American Energy, a member of the Board of Directors of the Institute of the Americas and Pan American Energy Steering Committee member. Juan Martin, hello.
How are you? Good morning.
Yes, good to see you and hear you. Decio Odone, I don't want to count how many La Jolla Conference caps you have, but plenty. Welcome back. The CEO of Analta. He's held jobs at Petrobras, ANP, and I think you've spoken under those banners at every single La Jolla Conference. So welcome back, Decio, also a former board member, and Analta, soon to be steering committee member. Good to see you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Always a pleasure to be here with you, especially now with Christian, Juan Martin, and Silva as well.
Well, thank you for introducing Sylvie Dapot, and congratulations, Sylvie. I think you've had a week now in your new job as the Executive Director for Natural Gas at the Brazilian Petroleum Institute, IBP. Congratulations, welcome. A pleasure to have you with us once again.
Thank you, Jeremy, for the introduction. I'm very happy to be at La Jolla. It's probably my first time, and to represent the IBP today.
Delighted to have you, and certainly not your first time at the Institute. I think we've seen you a lot in Brazil and Argentina, Uruguay. Christian Ituri, also somebody we've had with us over the years, I think at BG at one point, but Christian is now the New Markets General Manager for the Americas at Shell. Christian, good to see you again. I think we might be having a technical issue with his connection. We'll work on that. And as I mentioned, unfortunately, Rafaela Guedes from SEBRI, she's actually a senior fellow at our partner and collaborator SEBRI, and she's also at Petrobras and has been called away to a meeting at Petrobras. So let's jump right in, and I'll actually start with Argentina because I think we're going to spend a fair amount of time on Brazil, but let's kick off with Argentina. And Juan Martin, let me go to you first. In December, we had an event, and at that time, Argentina's government launched the latest iteration, a new program, Plan Gas. It's obviously something aimed at Vaca Muerta and the recovery. And for those of you who just listened to the panel before, that was something we talked about, how leveraging Vaca Muerta in the recovery in Argentina. So just quickly, where are we today? What's going on with that in Argentina? Obviously, this is a gas panel, so more specifically to gas in the Plan Gas and Vaca Muerta. Where are we? Help us understand the current state and outlook.
Well, let me start by saying that Vaca Muerta is a world-class play, and many of you know this already. It has enough resources to supply fivefold Argentina's aggregated demand for the next 20 years. Respect to gas and also respect to oil. So clearly, we have a lot of resources and good quality. The well productivity has been increasing year on year, Laterals of the wells are getting longer as we have develop the right equipment to be able to drill these wells. And wells recovery is estimated at 1 million barrels of oil equivalent per well for oil wells and 12.5 BCF for gas wells. So just to give you some numbers regarding where we are in the play right now, I think it's fairly mature regarding the technical aspects of the rock and what it can produce. And regarding our operations, well costs continue to go down, to decrease as we increase our productivity of our operations and the material costs. We're able to procure them better and optimize those. So definitely the play is well on its way, and the technical aspects of the play are covered and very solid. To comment on the question panel, one thing to mention is that Vaca Muerta is in a basin that has a history of oil and gas production, over 100 years of oil and gas production in the area. So there is infrastructure, there is existing infrastructure, which has helped us tackle the production we have to date. Still, on the gathering side and on the treatment side, we do need to develop new facilities for this. And all this is greenfield construction, which is the perfect opportunity, and we're taking advantage of this to design our facilities accordingly and improve the greenhouse capture of gases and be able to produce these facilities in a more responsible way also going forward. So this is definitely an opportunity that we have with this greenfield project. Argentina is on a path to recovery. After the pandemic, we saw a decrease in activity practically go down to zero in the second Q of 2020, and then as prices and demand came back, we were able to improve and get the activity going again, especially on the oil side with prices recovering. Right now we have 22 drilling rigs, half and half in oil and gas. And as you mentioned, in November, we signed the Plan Gas 4 incentive program, which definitely impacted on the activity of gas production. The Plan Gas was not only subscribed to Vaca Muerta, it was subscribed to all of the gas production of the country. So I'll go into a bit of detail what the Plan Gas is. For you to have an idea, gas in the Neuquina Basin peaked in 2019 at 4 BCF per day and has declined since at about 10% per year. Barely any gas wells have been drilled since 2019 up until the Plan Gas was announced. And this is mostly because there was no internal price for gas, which has been weighted down by fixed residential prices. So the Plan Gas consisted of a competitive bidding process where the government was able to firm up basically 100 million cubic meters a day for the next 4 years at a price of $3.35 per MMBTU. So this plan generates the price so that producers can invest and bring dollars into the country, generate the wells, generate the investments, and at the same time, the government is guaranteed a level of supply of gas which allows it to sustain the supply for the residential and industrial sectors and electric generation sectors for the next 4 years. So this is a very, very good program, which will also alleviate the trade balance of the country with local production and not having to import gas, which we can talk more about later if you want.
As a matter of fact, I was just we'll come back to that exact question for the entire panel later. Thank you, Juan Martin, for sort of actualizing where we are and updating us. Before we move to Brazil, Christian, you're with Shell. Obviously, Shell is an important player in Argentina. Did you want to comment, add anything to Juan Martin's comments on Plan Gas or Vaca Muerta?
No, absolutely. I think we coincide fully with Juan Martin's appreciation of the basin. Actually, this is one of the few unconventional basins outside of the U.S. where we still have, a significant presence in as Shell, because of the great resource that Vaca Muerta has. Obviously, the problems are complex and go beyond, just having a good resource. And the plant gas is, a way to redress some of those challenges by giving incentives, but at the same time by encouraging and having an obligation from the producers to invest more and export more. And it is a good way forward. However, and I believe that we're going to be speaking about this maybe later on. We still would like to see something that has a more structural solution rather than just a plant gas after a plant gas, which is possible that we can have and it would work, but structural solution would be more desirable for everybody involved, including the Argentinian population, of course.
No, very well put. I feel like at the Institute of Americas, the desire for a certain and consistent regulatory and investment framework. I think that's what you're calling for, the call to action there, Christian, which is a perfect way then to pivot, because if we think about Brazil and natural gas, indeed, we've talked for many years about Brazil's desire to bring more gas into the mix, into the matrix, particularly in the power market. And so there have been various efforts to indeed make a structural change. And now we've finally seen that in a law. And let me go to Sylvie to kick it off and talking about Brazil's new gas model. It's the culmination of many years, but help us understand, what are the key regulatory changes? And I think also important, if you could help us, what's pending for implementation, so that we can get, as Christian just noted about Argentina, that structural undergirding for the Brazilian gas sector. Sylvie, thank you.
Jeremy, I will start, and I'm sure Decio will help me, because Decio has been the head of ANP for several years during all the discussion of the law, and therefore he's been very active in that. But what happens is that Brazil has been in the process of restructuring its natural gas sector since 5 to 6 years, starting with the program Gas para Crescer, and then there has been various infra-legal measures and resolutions, etc. But really what needed to happen was the approval of this law, because the law actually gives a more secure legal background to all that is happening and still needs to happen. So it is a very important event that the law was finally approved after about 4 years in Congress, but it is not the end of what needs to happen, as you well said. The law defines the general guiding principles, and especially promotes the access to transportation to new players, but a lot of secondary regulation needs to happen in order to make the law operational. And this is going to be mainly by the National Petroleum and Gas Regulatory Agency. There is a lot of work to be done there. There are also work to be done by the gas transporter that will need to design and discuss with the regulatory agency about a network code, and this is an important step. As producer, we think that it could actually take quite a few years to actually have a complete set of working regulations in Brazil, and we do want to leapfrog some of the lesson, the learning curves that have been actually done in the US and especially in Europe. Brazil is looking at the European experience very closely. And we would like to leapfrog there. We don't have 20 years in front of us to actually wait to actually develop our gas resources. We think that it is something we need to do much faster than that. And so at the IBP, we are discussing with the other stakeholder, with the ANP, with the ministry, about a set of transition rules that would allow to actually go faster in the implementation of the law. I think this is a start, but certainly Christian and Decio will be able to expand on that.
No, perfect. Thank you. And we'll come back to you on some of the elements and why and how, in terms of promoting competition, is the goal of the law. So, okay, Decio, Sylvie called you out when you were at ANP for your fingerprints on the law, but now you're a producer. Now you are working at a company that's going to be one of the market participants. So, in as much as you can comment from the government perspective when you were there, but more importantly, what's from your perspective as a producer, the current and outlook for the new gas law, and what does it mean for your business? You're muted, sorry.
I apologize. As Sylvie said, it's very positive that we have now a new bill in place. We have worked hard during the past few years in order to create the infra-legal conditions, especially the discussion with Petrobras for the access to their assets. But now with the law, it's much more convenient for everyone. I think that there is a lot of confusion on seeing the role, and especially the supply of natural gas in Brazil. And I still see in the region a lot of discussions about the role of the government. And I think that what we have learned during the past few decades is that when you have the government interference, things that they don't work. I remember being in La Jolla at least for the past 20 years. And I remember discussing these issues many times in the conference. I remember when we started discussing the integration in the Southern Cone, the ring, the anillo energético, and the idea to connect the Bolivian, Argentinian, and Brazilian reserves and markets. And what we have seen in the past years is that things have changed, and they have changed dramatically. First, in those years, we didn't have the LNG as a kind of competitor and kind of alternative. We also didn't have the reserves in Brazil, especially in the pre-salt. Vaca Muerta was something that was not in the radar, under the radar. Now we have Vaca Muerta, we have Bolivian reserves declining very fast, and we have the reserves in Brazil. And then we see discussions on integration. I think what we have learned in this decade is that we were young and naive at that time, believing that we could integrate openly the regional markets. What we have seen is that politically this is not feasible, because when we have problems in every country, national security, national energy security is first. And then we have seen Argentina stopping exports to Chile, especially, but also to Uruguay and to Brazil. We see a enormous seasonality in Argentina. So Vaca Muerta has enormous potential, but Argentina must need additional, at least for the years to come, to import natural gas in the wintertime. So supply surplus in Argentina basically is summertime. So what I see now as a result of all these developments is that since LNG is available and easily available in the Atlantic basin, LNG is a price setter for this market. So if Bolivian gas wants to be competitive in Brazil, if the pre-salt gas must be competitive to reach the markets in Brazil, and if Argentina gas must get to Brazil, it must be competitive with LNG. So I see regions of influence for different markets. I believe that the Bolivian natural gas will be more competitive in Midwest Brazil. I see a possibility of a Vaca Muerta gas reaching Uruguaiana, a very southern part of Brazil, through pipelines, but I don't see the construction of big pipelines anymore. I see Vaca Muerta being an alternative as a LNG to Brazil, but not through big pipelines. And I see that the natural gas produced in Brazil in the pre-salt must be competitive with LNG in the coastline. So I think that what we have done in the past years in Brazil is to generate the conditions for the market to prevail, and not for the governments to intervene. I have seen Plan Gas 1, 2, 3, I believe it's 4 in Argentina now. And we always go back and forth in these things. And I hope that one day we'll see that the solution is let the market work. When we look back 100 years in the region, and Juan Martin said that Argentina is producing natural petroleum for more than 100 years, that's correct. When you look back 100 years of history in our region, we will see that after every intervention, after every nationalization, we have experienced decline in production. And we have seen that after every period in which we open up the countries for foreign investment to attract capital, we have seen increase in production and increase in supply. So I think that's what we are trying to do in Brazil, and I hope it will work this time.
Well, I thank you for your passion, and you've now answered every question I have for the panel about integration, LNG, anchoring demand. No, we'll come back to press you a little bit, but your thoughts on integration were indeed quite clear, and I want to get other folks' thoughts on that. But let's take some of what Decio just talked about here and go with some of the other things we wanted to discuss today. And let me start with perhaps you, Christian, to finalize any comments on the gas law, but then also let's start with this question about anchoring upstream growth, right? So what do you see, or what does Shell see in terms of the gas law? But then also add to that this question of what are the demand drivers? And you can take any of the countries you want in terms of anchoring upstream growth and investment.
So first of all, in terms of the gas law, I think that it is a huge step forward, and a lot of work has been done by a lot of people in order to get there. Sometimes in the face of quite a lot of opposition, but the law that as it has stand out now is a very good law and a big step forward. Implementation, as Sylvie said, will take some time, and there's still some question marks about how can we make things truly stable, and transportation is one of them. And I think we need to make sure that even though we have 3 transportation networks, that they can all play with each other, and in a way where we have common rules and regulations, because what we cannot have is that as gas goes from one network to the other, all of a sudden everything changes, because we do want to make sure that we can as far as possible supply every customer that is in Brazil. So that is very important. But I think that the essentially what we need to understand is that there's been a great transformation of the natural gas sector in Brazil since the age when Decio and others started the Bolivia-Brazil integration, and then really it started the market, and that was to me a huge step up. So we went, first step, create a market, and understand that market creation. And it took a while, but now we have a market that has been created. If we want to go from just maintaining that market to the second wave of that market, and increasing it, we need to see that there are two things that are necessary. Well, one, of course, is to have incremental demand, and the creation of the incremental demand comes from what are the needs of the different industries that will use this gas. So you have certainly a role that needs to be played by the gas to power industry. Although Brazil has made huge strides towards even further, relying on renewables for electricity with solar and wind, there is still a huge role for natural gas to play as a balancing factor, and that will be more and more so in the future, and that is recognized by the authorities. But the next one is you need to also create much more industrial demand, and the creation of that industrial demand comes from seeing as to how do we position natural gas in terms of the needs for certain types of industry to decarbonize themselves right now. And I think that we have a window of opportunity to help, the metals industry, to help, the cement industry, to help other industries decarbonize, quickly, by, having the right conditions for natural gas and the right price for natural gas to be there. Now, one of the challenges that Brazil has is that although we have a lot of reserves, we need to get those reserves that are usually offshore to the market. And if we, and this is where I think, there could be not government intervention, but certainly nation building type of projects where, we look at models with free market that have established, national type of infrastructure in a way that is guided by the government, but done on a market way. So for example, new pipelines from offshore where multiple producers commit to these pipelines, and therefore they're not burdened with the cost of a single pipeline. So similar to what, for example, Norway has done with the Norled and the gas-led pipeline system, where you can have the government steer in order to align the different interests of the companies, but still make it happen. So there is still a very strong role for the government, of course, and I think that it can be quite positive, but it has to be in a way in which we do it within the market framework.
Thank you, Christian. Sylvie, let's sort of maybe wrap up this question about the Brazil gas before I go to Argentina about the anchoring demand. So any thoughts from your side, obviously wearing the IBP hat now with most of the market participants, any further thoughts about anchoring demand?
Well, yes, we think that there is a lot of unsatisfied demand for gas in Brazil, and as Christian really puts it, it's a question of understanding, with which other competitive fuels we are against, and understanding how then to place natural gas. It's obviously not only a question of price, it's a question of decarbonization objective, as Christian put. It's a question also of infrastructure. We are a country where we still have a very small distribution network. So there are quite a lot of potential gas users which are not connected to the network. Brazil has a vast territory, and it is not as densely populated and densely economically populated as the US or as Europe. So it may well be that gas will not ever reach all the consumers, the potential consumers in Brazil, and because of infrastructure can be quite expensive to reach certain markets which are smaller and more further away. But most of the Brazil economic activity and population is quite close to the coastline. So it's quite accessible for domestic gas, which is mainly offshore, and it's accessible to LNG. And with regards to Bolivian gas, there is a very large pipeline in existence. So Bolivian gas also can reach the main centers like São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, the south of the country. So in relation to decarbonization, just a word of caution, because when we think about gas substituting fuels with more carbon, such as fuel oil and maybe LPG, etc., in Brazil, the low-hanging fruits have already been taken. So if you look at where the pipelines arrive, the industry has already converted to gas, to natural gas. And so, and in Brazil, in the industrial sector, there is a lot of use of biofuels. This is a specific characteristic of the Brazilian industrial mix. And it could be tricky for gas to replace this biomass-derived fuel, not only because of price, but also because of the decarbonization objectives of industries. Okay, but I agree with Christian that there are key industries such as the metal industry. Cement, I find a little bit more difficult to have it converted to gas in Brazil. I think there is a lot of space for the fertilizer industry. Brazil is a big, is a country with a very large agribusiness industry that needs a lot of fertilizer. And at the moment, we are importing nearly all of our fertilizers. So there is a space for fertilizer industry to develop or to redevelop, because many factories were actually closed in the past 10 years. And then, you know, we need to, there are certain pricing and infrastructure barriers at the moment, but I think that there, apart from the power sector, fertilizer is probably one of the main industry that producers are looking at the moment. And I would also say that besides domestic production, Brazil has space for all types of natural gas. We have space for LNG imports. We have space for imports from Bolivia, because in reality, the domestic production is an unflexible domestic production, being associated with more than 80% associated with oil. It's rather unflexible. So to give flexibility to the gas system, we will continue to have a need of LNG and Bolivian gas.
Thank you, Sylvie, and you're actually telegraphing exactly sort of where we want to go next. But let's appreciate, I think, very important. So let's talk about Argentina, Juan Martin. Anchoring demand, how does the domestic market anchor demand, and what are the key areas? I mean, we've heard very clearly some ideas in Brazil. So I would pose the question to you about Argentina, and let me add to that question about demand growth and anchoring and spurring investment. The issue of what I would say is the question on LNG, importers or exporters. And so consider both of those themes and share with us about Argentina, and then we'll come back and ask the rest of the panel as well about LNG a little bit more. So Juan Martin, those two elements, please.
Probably the best way to put it politely is the best domestic project we can have to anchor demand is to export, to go out into the world. I think once Argentina reaches that point, exporting gas to the world via LNG, I know Vaca Muerta can be competitive. Many of our internal barriers should be solved. That being said, there are things that need to be done internally in the short term to enable better demand. Specifically, there's investment in pipelines that needs to be done so that as other basins decline, Vaca Muerta can be one of the main providers of gas for the market. Today, there's a probably 30 million cubic meter day bottleneck that if it were not there, we could invest and develop more gas and still avoid some of those LNG imports. Regarding additional projects that can be done, I think they've been mentioned. They can be done in Brazil. They can be done in Argentina. We're obviously integrated regionally, economically, and those opportunities are obviously here also with Vaca Muerta gas regarding petrochemical, urea developments that can be done. Also, the transition to blue fuels or green fuels. Having the Vaca Muerta gas is an opportunity to, as technology appears, be one of the forefront runners in that, having the competitive cost of gas locally. No, so I think those are some of the opportunities we have. But really, our what we need to do is export. We need to get to those LNG plants and be able to export gas to Asia, to Europe, and to Brazil, as Decio was saying, being able to take advantage of the market economies.
So just to dial in a little bit, so right now, in your earlier remarks, you talked about the complete stoppage last year. Argentina is once again importing LNG, correct?
Yes. Argentina has subscribed. Argentina has a big swing in gas demand, right? So the valley is 100 million cubic meters a day, and the peak is 160. So we have a 60 million cubic meter a day swing, which is about 2 BCF. And the plan gas is still activity since plan gas has been signed, has begun, but for this winter we're still going to be needing and we're always going to need some of that gas to be fulfilled by LNG. So Argentina has contracted 47 LNG boats for this period of winter, and prices averaging $7.50 if you take all the different tenders that were done, and obviously this is much more than what the plan gas is currently paying Argentine developers. So this could be an opportunity for us to develop further should we have a better pricing methodology.
7 is not, I mean, because it had been a couple of years since any LNG imports, right? Even seasonal.
Yes. Well, seasonal, you always need some.
So, final question, then we'll ask the rest of the panel this question about LNG. But what in one sentence, what needs to happen to do what you said at the very beginning of the anchor is exports via LNG? So, what in one sentence, what do you see needing to occur for Argentina to become a global on the global LNG market?
I think it was said in the previous panel also, Argentina needs to be able to have access to competitive cost of capital. I think the rest is all here to be done. So we need to attract the investment. Okay.
Thanks, Juan Martin. Decio, okay, you I think you've already answered this, but continue your thought process and share a little bit more. I'll ask you, LNG in Brazil, importers or exporters? We sort of know the current state of affairs, but give us some further thoughts on that.
Oh, I think that LNG today Brazil is an importer, and as being an importer, LNG is kind of price comparison for domestic production and for other imports. In the future, Brazil may become, using pre-salt gas, an exporter of LNG. But before doing that, we have the domestic market to supply. And I think that the opportunity to be more competitive for the producers in the domestic markets is more attractive than exporting LNG. But there are a few mistakes that we make when we think about Brazil. Sylvie was saying that we will probably won't see the whole country being connected through pipelines. That's correct. We are not in a country in which we have winter and summer. So in Argentina, this is an alibi that Juan Martin was mentioning, is because in the winter time, the need for natural gas for heating in the domestic markets is strong. We will never have that in Brazil. So we will never have the same need for natural gas in the commercial and residential markets here. That complicates the construction of extensive network of pipelines. But we do need natural gas so far in the power generation system. I think what we must see in Brazil is, as Christian was saying, pipelines bring pre-salt production to Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo. And then the power auctions, recognizing the benefits of having large power plants, gas-fired power plants, in those regions in which we have domestic gas producing, generating power to stabilize the system. Not a system in which we have a power auction that does not recognize where the gas is being produced. So we tend to have winners in the northern part of Brazil with LNG, with cheaper to ship from the US. We must combine availability of natural gas in the Santos and Campos Basin, the need of power in the consumption center, which is Rio and São Paulo, luckily for us in the same region. So we must put these two things together. When we put these things together, we will have a market for the pre-salt natural gas, generating royalties and riches in Brazil. And then we will have an anchor consumer for offering additional volumes of natural gas to the industrial market. I mean, that's the vision I have. But not the running a power auction without sending the right location signs, which is power plants must be built where the domestic natural gas is and where the market is. I think if we recognize that, then we will have the anchors to increase natural gas consumption. Then we will have the incentives for the producers to produce the pre-salt gas. But this gas must be competitive with LNG. If it's not, everything goes south, because if for the consumer is more competitive to bring LNG, we will bring LNG. So the domestic gas, pre-salt gas, must be at Brazilian coastline in Rio and São Paulo, competitive with LNG. That's the view I have.
It's very clear. Let me bring Christian in. So very clear, about sort of some ideas and the vision, but the price and the competition is key here. Shell is obviously a major global LNG player. Is there, let me rephrase a little bit directly to you, Christian, can Brazil or should Brazil be an LNG exporter?
So I think that for both Brazil and Argentina, there is a possibility of them being a net exporter of natural gas. The reserves are there. Now the challenges are actually very similar. But first, before I answer that question, I think it's clear to me that we need to understand the nature of LNG. And LNG doesn't only just bring a pricing signal, brings flexibility into the system. So it is very possible that you can be both an importer and an exporter of LNG at the same time because of the flexibility that you have. And I think that the challenge in the market is making sure that the market prices that flexibility in the right way. And that's something that we still yet to see. But the flexibility that LNG brings is essential for balancing the systems. Yeah. Now, for both Argentina and I fully agree with Juan Martin, the solution for Argentina to produce more is exporting. I am not sure if the exports is going to be LNG, if it's going to be fertilizer, if it's going to be power, or a combination of all of them. But export is, one of the solutions that we need to have. Now, in terms of being an LNG exporter, we all need to realize that LNG, it's a global commodity. And we have a lot of plants around the world that are in the plan of being constructed. So what do you need? What do you need in order to get somebody like Shell or one of the major companies to actually commit to the multi-billion-dollar investment that you would require? Is you need to have very competitive resource, because you're not competing against gas produced here or gas produced there. You're competing against Qatar. You're competing against Papua New Guinea. You're competing against the US Gulf Coast that has infrastructure, that has already plants, that have very low resources. So if we are able to show that either Brazil or Argentina or both can be competitive in terms of costs, total cost of production, then I believe that that's going to be possible. But it is a global competition, and it goes much beyond just the needs in the region.
I think that's a perfect way. So let me just quick question. So the answer to the question of LNG importers or exporters is both, for definitely Argentina and Brazil. Give me a thumbs up if that's we'll put words in your mouth. Everyone agrees? Argentina and Brazil should be both exporters. Oh, okay. All right. So we're going to go right to Sylvie here. And Sylvie, in your answer as to why you don't think it can be both or should be both, LNG exporters, importers, take up what I think everyone is talking about in terms of cost competition. I think this is crucial, right? Especially in Brazil, the infrastructure for pre-salt coming onshore, can it compete? So your thoughts on LNG and then that cost of competition as well, please.
Well, the two are links, actually. I'm going to answer the two at the same time. So building on what Christian was saying, what I see, at least for the next 10 years in Brazil, is that LNG, the netback on LNG exports would be lower than the netback on other types of monetization on the Brazilian coast. So I don't see why the producer should commit on such multi-billion projects to export LNG when they have several options, actually, because gas in the pre-salt is also, in many instances, is re-injected to increase the production of oil. And then, if this is not the case, maybe some of the fields they do not need that, or commercialization at 200 kilometers through a pipeline seems to me would be more economical than building either a large LNG floating plant, liquefaction plant, like of course Shell is doing in other parts of the world. That could be done here too, but the cost of these plants are quite expensive still. Or another way that has been proposed in Brazil is to build the same offshore pipeline to bring the gas to shore and then liquefy it. Of course, if this was done, the flexibility that Brazil would gain would be very interesting, because you may not need to export to other countries the LNG that's produced. You can have an export, use this gas in Brazil, but bypass transportation and use the regasification plants that are already along the coastline and are going to pop up more in the next few years. So it would certainly be interesting. I just don't know if the investment wouldn't be too big to actually make sense in the short to medium term.
It is part of that calculation because of the extreme competition brought by renewables, particularly in Brazil?
That's a good question. I think that should be answered in looking more of the power sector than the gas sector. there is a big discussion on whether the new renewables, so wind and solar, will actually be a good match with our very large hydro capacity, and whether it will the growth of wind and solar will with hydro will decrease the need of firm thermal generation capacity. I think that we have yet to see how these different trends will play out in the Brazilian sector. I think that we certainly power plants will be competing with relatively cheap renewables in the next few auctions, and I would join Décio then in saying that natural gas-fired power plants should be recognized for what they bring to the power sector. So, of course, location is very important, and stability of the system, security of power supply, etc. So, competition should be equal. I'm not advocating to actually have subsidies on natural gas for power generation. But there should be some externalities that are brought by the gas-fired power plant recognized in the auction system.
Perfect. Yeah, and I'll use this as an opportunity. We did a deep dive interview about the opportunity and explosion of renewables in Brazil with Thiago Barral, who is the head of the Empresa Pesquisa Energética, the research arm and the policy planning of the Ministry of Energy and Mines in Brazil. So check that out on the La Jolla Conference exclusive content site. And then also we've posted, thanks Rita Oliveira, posted in the chat, Nelson Narciso, one of our non-resident fellows, we had a steering committee discussion about the gas law in Brazil, and Nelson made a policy brief, wrote up a policy brief, and we're very happy to publish that a couple of weeks ago with exactly some of the points we've been talking about today in terms of where we are, implementation, et cetera. So we're running out of time, and I want to formally bring the topic of integration into the conversation. It's been here with us from the beginning, but let's formally introduce it to wrap up our discussion. And there are some specific questions from the audience I'll weave in as part of this. But let's go sort of how we started. Juan Martin, with you. The way I'll sort of phrase this is, what is the current reality for regional integration? Your thoughts, please. On gas, of course.
Yes, I think, well, energy. I think we have, Argentina is well connected to Chile, to Bolivia, and to Brazil, and we also have economic ties in the region. So there's both sides. I think that this Plan Gas has provisions to allow for firm exports, which is a step forward in that direction to developing Argentine trust. As Décio was saying, we need to be able to show as a country that we can export and be consistent in this. And if we are going to become an exporter in the future, through LNG also, going in that direction. And then on the economic side, I think, well, and I said energy because we have an electric line connecting us to Brazil also, which is an alternative way of also providing this regional integration. And on the economic side, I think there's a bunch that we can do regarding. We have an existing petrochemical hub in Bahía Blanca, and with gas from Vaca Muerta, we could easily develop petrochemicals and other plastics which could be integrated into the economy of the region and value added in Brazil or elsewhere. So there's a lot that can be done regionally to integrate aside from just pipelines.
No, fair enough. I tried to put you into a gas corner, so it's true. I mean, gas by wire. So let's go. Thank you, Juan Martin. It's the subject of the panel, so I guess I felt it. Christian, let me go to you on that same question, and if you don't mind, there was a very specific question from the audience about Bolivia gas and the future of Bolivian gas exports to Brazil. So in your comments and further thoughts on the future or reality of regional integration, if you could specify and talk a little bit more in detail, because I don't think we've really gotten that deep into where we stand with Brazil, Bolivian exports to Brazil.
So, as Sylvie said, I think that Bolivia plays a very good role in terms of balancing the needs of natural gas in Brazil, and it has historically so, and Petrobras has done very well in having that additional source of supply, but also source of flexibility. I think that it's unfortunate that the exploration success in Bolivia has not proven to be what some people would have expected, and therefore the reserves are decreasing rapidly. But what we can see is that the demand for flexibility and for flexible gas at the right price is still there, and that if there is to be more exploration success in Bolivia in the future, there could be a place for Bolivian gas. But also, let's remember about just the geographical positioning of Bolivia. So it is a way to maximize existing infrastructure. For example, be able to export gas from Argentina into Brazil without having to build a new pipeline. So there is a possibility of still there being a role because of the existing infrastructure. But unless there is big exploration success in Bolivia, what we'll see is that Bolivian supply will be replaced by domestic supply in Brazil, but also by LNG imports in Brazil. But I just wanted to go back to a point what Martin made, and it is integration via electrons. And if we look into the future and we see that more and more of our energy needs are going to be supplied through electrons in the region and the same as everywhere else in the world, then the integration via electrons, which historically has been much easier and less politically controversial, is probably one of the key ways that we can become an even more integrated region in the Southern Cone. So I think that there is a big potential for that too.
No, well put. I mean, I think the whole climate imperative and everything we heard from the first session this morning, and in California we talk, and in other places about electrifying everything. Exactly. Thank you. Sylvie, any further thoughts on regional integration, and then we'll have Decio tell us how he really feels.
Well, I couldn't coincide more with what Christian said about the unfortunate decrease in reserve in Bolivia. I will try to give another angle, to just not to repeat what Christian has said, is that I see some difficulties in the relationship between Bolivia and the new reality of the Brazilian market. Bolivia has exported under a very long-term contract to just one company, which was a company, nearly a government company, under the umbrella of or the benediction of an agreement between foreign affairs ministries between the two countries. So that was for a long time the situation, a very comfortable situation. And now Bolivia is meeting new players in Brazil. It has to understand the new realities of the Brazilian markets, and has to understand that it will need to actually divide its supply to Brazil into many different, not only many different contracts, but many different products. So as Christian was said, Bolivian gas can have the flexibility that pre-salt gas doesn't have. So this is a product that can be sold, but I'm not sure right now institutional Bolivia is ready and open and enough open-minded and ready technically to actually be able to manage so many different needs and types of contracts. So that may be in the short term, that may be something that limits what Bolivia could offer to Brazil. And then in the longer term, of course, if there are not big changes in E&P policy in Bolivia, probably production will decrease.
Thank you for underscoring and adding to some very clear points. Yes, indeed. Let's see. There's a relatively new government in Bolivia. Seems to be a lot of discussion around lithium. We'll see what happens in trying to better understand some of the points you both have raised here about their reserves and going forward. So Decio, finalizing our panel, and then I'll actually ask a question to each of you at the end. But final thoughts. You were pretty clear at the outset about integration, and I think we first met in Uruguay at the big meeting about the Anillo Energético, which you referenced. But bring us home here on this question of integration and share any final thoughts you had, please.
Oh, as I said in the initial remarks, I believe that those ideas of effective natural gas integration in the region with the construction of pipelines and dependence between countries is gone. It's gone because when it was politically tested, it failed. I mentioned that the contracts between Argentina and Chile, and then Bolivia nationalization. So I don't think that we have enough trust to go back to those days, especially now that we have LNG as an alternative without the need of heavy investments in pipelines. But I do agree with everyone saying that ad hoc integration, ad hoc projects are the way. I mean, using the existing pipelines, expanding a little bit, not big project, but some extension to southern Brazil, I see as possible. LNG imports from Argentina, and especially what Christian and Juan Martin were saying about electrification, electrons, increasing the exchange of power, and petrochemicals, fertilizers. So those ad hoc interactions and integration, I think they are the future.
I appreciate that. It's very clear, you know, the idea of a large several country international agreement such as the energy ring, where you had the interconnection of infrastructure and reserves and anchors of demand and offtake.
Jeremy, what we have seen as political interests and national shortage, they were paramount. So when you have surplus, everybody's happy. But when you have problems of supply, then national interests are first. So I don't see that after we have experienced that we're going to try that again.
Well, policy is politics, so there's no doubt. Let's thank you. Before we wrap up, I think you all given me usually I end with a yes or no question, but instead I'm going to do multiple choice here, because I think you've laid on the table something I want to ask you and put you on the spot, which is why we do yes or no. But instead, the multiple choice question is, what is, we'll say Southern Cone, but perhaps we should be more broad in the region. But the question is, what is the long-term energy future? And there's three potential answers, hence the multiple choice. Electricity, natural gas, or hydrogen. So Juan Martin, no pressure going first. A for Argentina, first in the alphabet. The long-term energy future for Southern Cone, Latin America is A, electricity, B, natural gas, C, hydrogen. Oh, your answer's on mute. I love that's nice.
There we are. So my answer is yes.
I like it.
I think, yeah, it's all linked. I think there's a huge natural gas opportunity in the short term, and electrons. We spoke about that, so I think I'm going to go with electrons as a glue for everything.
Okay, thank you. Glad we got the mic on. I was worried you were, sorry. Christian, thank you, Juan Martin.
So it all depends what you mean by long term. But
5 years. No, I'm kidding.
okay.
No. It's a fair point.
No, but I actually would go for hydrogen. And why would I go for hydrogen? Is because hydrogen is a potential demand also for natural gas and for power.
Fair enough.
So hydrogen will be the unifying factor in all of this. And in the very long term, I do think that we all acknowledge that hydrogen has a much more important role to play. So I would go for hydrogen.
Okay. Well put. Thank you. Sylvie, please.
I was going to say the same. I was going to define what is long term, but I would go with Juan Martin. I think that there is a timeline, and natural gas still has potential. I would say there's a window of 10 years, not much more, and then the future will be a combination of electrons and hydrogen.
I think 10 years is probably a fair, most of we look at some of the IEA, BP, they go out to 2030. So 10 years from now is probably a fair definition of long term. So, all right, Decio, somehow you get the final word here, my friend.
Thank you. I go with electricity because natural gas is to generate electricity. And maybe in the long run, hydrogen, as Christian said. But in this window of 10, 15 years in front of us, electricity.
Thank you. Electrifying everything. Well, we'll keep talking about these issues. We appreciate all of your wonderful insights today. Congratulations to Sylvie on her new job. Decio as well. I guess we should congratulate you on your appointment as CEO. Christian, good to see you. Juan Martin, Bulgaroni, thank you. Our board member, appreciate your time today. Round of virtual applause, everyone, please. Our audience is virtually clapping. Thank you all very much. This has been wonderful. We actually are right on the dot for our panel end time. We will now move back to the virtual lounge. We'll leave the virtual stage, go to the virtual lounge. And just a final reminder for folks, if you haven't figured out, when you get to the tables, you can use your mouse and hover over and you see the little circle icons, who else is sitting at the table. Turn on your camera, turn on your microphone if you want to chat with other folks at your table. You can move tables by, again, with your mouse going to a different table, hovering over, double clicking, and voila, you have then joined that table. And final point, if you want to have a one-on-one meeting, there are two-seat tables on the outsides, 21 on the left, 25 on the right. Meet up with somebody, have a private virtual meeting, take advantage of the networking. We'll see you in 15 minutes for our Andes discussion, a wonderful session. And I will, again, thank you all very much. It's been a real pleasure. I think I join everyone in saying we can't wait to see you here in person in La Jolla for the 31st annual. So that it'll have to wait. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day. Appreciate your time. Here we go back to the lounge.